This podcast is a conversation by Julie Benetti and Susan Barbaro and is a production of VI Alliance, copyright 2019. And this chart-busting hit, Alone Leave Me, courtesy of New Threads, is available everywhere. We are continuing with Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching, number 10.
This is Susan and Julie.
And so I think the focus is learning and experiencing here. Almost asking the question, can you live in, with, around, and about Tao? And what does that mean? And again, it's kind of focusing in the space between the breath, specifically educating the soul so that it encompasses one and you stay true to the core of what you really know and live with that and stay in the flow of things. Otherwise, you get watered down by judgments or what occurs. And so I think that's what I kind of get out of this one.
Every line says, can you educate? Can you make? Can you cleanse? Can you love? Can you penetrate everything with your inner clarity and purity without having need for action? Generating and nourishing. Generating and not possessing, being effective and not retaining, increasing and not dominating. This is the secret life. To me, the part here is also, can you? And it's interesting because I'm also reading the other books in tandem with this. And the can you, to me, the answer to that is your imagination. Can you imagine making your strength unified? Can you imagine cleaning your secret seeing to see clearly? Can you imagine it? If you can't imagine it, you can't make it happen. I agree with you. This is about living here. But to me, when I look at that, it's that can you? It's the idea of the imagination. And that if you can imagine doing something, and sometimes for me, when I have a hard time doing something, I say, come on, Susan, think, come on, you can do this. And it's getting rid of the garbage that's not working for you, and it's like, can you imagine things working for you?
And I agree, because the stress of that, meaning the stress of those words, they're continuously in each, every second sentence. The stress of that words is almost like a dare. It's almost like the energy of a dare. Can you be strong but still engaged, knowing how it is here? Can you see the truth and still be involved with others and not get corrupted in your own thoughts? And,
I'll be the first to admit that I do. I get caught in that. So then that's when I admit, I sit back and I say, all right, come on, you know better. You know this, and it really becomes a matter of mind over matter. I have to tell myself, yes, this is what the truth of it is, and yes, this is how it's going to work out for me. This is how I'm choosing to see it. I think it's, can you? I think the idea of can you do this? Cool.
So moving on to number 11, 30 spokes around the hub, and their nothingness consists the carriage's effectiveness. One hollows the clay and shapes it into pots, and its nothingness consists the pot's effectiveness.
Right.
And there's such a strength to that in the nothingness. There's a huge amount of effectiveness. And it really, to me, it deals with the importance of being. Because a lot of times, do you have a purposeful life? What are you doing? Are you kind of stuck in the do? What are your goals? What are your desires? And here it just says, it talks about the importance of being in your usefulness in a way that really elicits a pictorial understanding from the creation of a pot. I mean, that's so beautiful that you need to create it by hollowing out the clay. Yet the most important part is that empty part, because that's what holds everything. And I think that's a good kind of derivative of almost man, the outside and the inside.
And the last two lines, what exists serves for possession. What does not exist serves for effectiveness. There's the physical and really the energy. And I think it also comes down to this whole idea of, which is your favorite, are we a soul and a body, or are we a body and a soul? They're both there, and what you think is nothing is really the most powerful part of you.
Right.
Which is the inside of the bowl. And what he puts in here, the inside is where it's clear there's nothing, but that's what's effective. That's where you hold soup, you hold whatever it's going to hold that you're going to enjoy. The pot is just a vessel to give you, to hold what's important. Again, bring it to cosmology, and I'm not by any means an expert, or it's the whole idea of dark matter is, we think it's nothing. Again, dark is simply, it's really invisible. They just say dark because they say space is dark and they can't see it, but it's not necessarily dark. But it's interesting because they think it's nothing. We think there's nothing between us. We're sitting here talking and there's nothing.
Right.
Yet that's everything, is holding everything. I
Right,
agree.
there you go. It's holding everything.
Exactly. I agree.
And I think, again, I would stress that this is also about usefulness. And sometimes you wonder what you're doing and why you're doing it. And it's not that we're all, cogs in the system, but it's more that we're all in this together. And that's something.
Yep.
And actually, that's Tao. So that's really cool. I love that.
That's what we're reading.
There you go.
All right. Oh, number 12. Go ahead, Jules.
Okay, to me, number 12 kind of gives the sentiment of reaction. Your reaction of your experience with the Tao. And we can look at the 5 colors and I can ask you, what do you think that means?
I thought it was fascinating that he picked 5 because, of course, I work with numbers and I'm like, well, wait a minute. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, 7. It should be 7 colors because that's what our eyes perceive. And then the 5 flavors, and the reason I go with, I can understand 5 because in Chinese medicine, they do attribute 5 with the 5 elements and 5 tastes.
So that's where I went. I went just to the 5 and and immediately I thought of, okay, north, south, east, and west. You talk about the 4 quarters and the Great Spirit. In the realm of, whatever you want to call a mystical calculation of a grand circle or whatever, to do whatever kind of work you want. But then I also went into the senses, taste, touch, smell, hear, see. And in the relevance of this, I just felt the sensation of what he dabbles in and connects the 5 to is just, it's not a physical focus, right?
Well,
that's not to take the physical focus.
It's what we physically see, hear, taste, touch, smell, those all work, as the last line says, work for the body's needs.
Right.
Not for the eyes. He removes the other and takes this. I know I just jumped ahead, but it's basically like those are all good for the body, for the physical.
And that's funny. I thought when he mentions the man of calling, I immediately went to, okay, it works for the body's needs. So that's the energy and not the eyes, which is the perception or the physical. And then I always, I went right to that representation that you always do about the thumb.
The thumb is the me and the eye is the body. I mean, the thumb is a part of the body. So the thumb is important. The thumb needs to do the job of the thumb. It can't be a knee. It can't be an eye. But the thumb is a greater part of the body. The thumb works in conjunction with the body.
Yes, because, the last stanza there, therefore the man of calling works for the body's needs, not for the eyes. I mean, that's perfect. Number 13. Now, I got the semblance of the energy of this as the reaction as the person. Again, I see a lot of sarcasm in this, yet serious.
Because it talks about persona, it talks about grace, and then honor. And, grace is as shameful as fright. Honor is as a great evil like the persona. So persona is an individual's social facade, a character or an image. So it talked about honor is a great evil like the persona. And I looked up honor. Of course, it's written in a British format. American English is not the same as British English. And the guy that wrote it used the British English.
Richard Wilhelm.
Even though he's German. So honor represents reputation, recognition, standing. So when I take a step back, he's putting together persona and honor, and all this is like all bad. And grace, being aligned with that, we think as grace is being from God and virtuous, and it's saying all of that is as bad as persona, which to me is like fake. It's all this fake stuff is what he's saying is all the evil. And so it's like at the bottom when he says the reason I experience great evil is that I have a persona. If I have no persona, what evil could I experience? So then that was one thing. And then at the end it says, therefore, whoever honors the world in his persona, to him one may entrust the world. Whoever loves the world in his persona, to him, one may hand over the world. So to me, it's like it's a joke. There's the sarcasm. If you're caught up, I honor the world I'm honor, I recognize as to who I am, then, you can entrust the world to them. It's almost like, yeah, here you go. Here's the world that you've created. I give it to you. It's almost like, this is what you believe. well, here you go. I bequeath it to you. Good luck with that. It's a little bit sarcastic note, but that was my interpretation, because I'm like, that's interesting, because it didn't make sense to me. And I'm like, oh, if I go into sarcasm.
That's why I said it's a projection of more serious sarcasm, because it's almost like a whiplash sarcasm. If that's what you're going to do. And the funny part to me is that, I got a sense of the persona of the you that you're projecting. Is that really your presence? That's the you that you're projecting. And the grace as the judgment based on your actions. And the funny part about it is, if once you attain it, I think he says that in there, then you have to maintain it. So that's not really the actual you. Agreeing with what you just said, honoring the world in your presence, it's entrusted to you in that sense, almost like the Tao. And loving the world in your presence, you can share it with all.
When you say it, I didn't get it that way, but grace, because it is like virtuous, it's like godlike, and if you attain grace, you're kind of stuck with it.
Right, you have to maintain it. That's hard. It takes work.
Well, it's not real.
Right.
I mean, no one is any one thing. Nobody. We could sit here and talk about racism, we could talk about bigotry, we can talk about, all those things. And that's if you assume someone's one thing and that's it.
Right.
And that's just not the way we're built. We're, skin color or your beliefs are a part of it. But, that doesn't make up who you are. And people change all the time. I mean, maybe you don't change your skin color, but that certainly doesn't mean that your skin color means any one particular thing. So so grace, you don't think of it that way. But if, you're such a good person, now you're stuck. How do you make mistakes? How do you grow and maybe make a mistake and do something that's wrong, not because you want to, but then that limits you. That's what this does, is it limits you.
So 14 is a little bit of a long one, yet the vibration I got was just how Tao is continuous, the continuity of Tao. And there's a certain vibration of uncertainty and chaos, yet still being in that and being resilient at going with the flow.
The only thing I took to on this is the very end, because of course I always go to the end because that's where the answer is. It's like, you want to open to the book and go to the last page. Like it says, if one holds fast to the Tao of antiquity in order to master today's existence, one may know the ancient beginning. This means Tao's continuous thread. And, to me, again, I think I go to the, the sarcasm, because if you hold fast, and of course I read, people think of holding fast as it's like you're holding on so tightly. And I looked it up, and it's a nautical term. It was almost like avast, hold fast. It started from like Norwegian or Danish, And the meaning, and there is an importance to what I'm saying. The meaning was for deckhands to get a good grip. So it sounds like you would think it's digging, hanging tough, but it actually meant the opposite. To a sailor, and this is, I'm quoting someone, it says, stop whatever it is you are doing. If one holds fast to the Tao of antiquity, which really means stop everything you're doing, you're not holding on to it, just be in that space in order to master, then you may know the ancient beginning. So actually, instead of holding fast to it and trying to get it, sometimes you kind of have to stop everything and just be in the space of it.
And that actually circles back around to the beginning, because it gives that ambiguity of what we talked about in the very first few stanzas of this, 1, 2, 3, and 4. You look for it, you don't see it. You listen for it, you don't hear it, and the subtleness of it. You reach for it, it's not there, and then it's funny, it goes right into the non-existence of it, and it takes us right into the non-existence of Tao. But one really beautiful explanation, this is called the formless form, the objectless image. I mean, that's just like kind of a mind expander. Because if you think about what that means, the formless form, the objectless image is so powerful. I mean, if you go to neuroscience and what your brain does and how your mind constructs stuff and how you're comprehending that, it kind of releases it all. And you go into, wait a minute, that's a dichotomy there. It's two negatives. And so it takes us back to the source, that there's nothing to perceive. You go all the way back to the continuous thread. It's almost like a continuous cycle, and you access everything in the present moment.
15.
So going into 15, I think continuing with the continuity of Tao, it stretches into giving us a glint of, what the ancient beginnings were, almost the Tao of antiquity. It's almost like a time travel passage. at least to me. The ancient times, they were competent as masters. They were one with the invisible forces of the hidden. And this is fascinating because how are others interpreting them? And for me in this translation, it sounds like, so others can only describe what they see, what they wonder about, what they're possibly afraid of, what they're not sure about. Yet they really don't know the masters. And if you think about life today, that occurs all the time with everybody when you perceive something incorrectly and you really don't know what someone else is thinking. You don't know what they're doing. You don't know why they're doing something. And this is fascinating because it kind of time travels us back to, here's the masters. They stay clear and they stay steadfast because they're in the Tao. They're with the Tao. They're not looking for something from the outside world or from the world of perception, yet they're being perceived. And all the while, they're complete with Tao.
So I just think that if you can create stillness little by little, you can clear up the turbid little by little, and you can do those things, when you're in that, you do not desire abundance. Because the more you clear things, the more you see that things are just things. And if you don't have abundance, it says, for only because he has no abundance, therefore can he be modest, avoid what is new and attain completion. Things out there do not make you whole. You make you whole. You're in yourself makes yourself whole. And I don't think there's this is the answer for any one person. I think everyone becomes whole in the way that they do. We can read, we can listen to music, we can look at art, we can do things that can help us, but everyone has their own definition of being whole. Yet what I think is continuous through everyone is it's within us. The being whole's within us. There's nothing out there that will bring you, and he says, he uses the word attain completion. To me, I figure attain completion is being the feeling of being whole. And we all need to learn this, and I throw myself right there in the front of the line that we all need to learn to understand that there's nothing we need out there that's going to make us whole. And the minute we start looking outside, God, you're losing it. All this is going to all go away. So,
and it's a beautiful description of the world of perception.
Okay,
number 16. For me, the vibration of this is kind of just staying steadfast with Tao. And how do you do that? You just stay clear, stay in the space between. There's a stillness there. You go with the flow. The flow occurs. It's continuous. There's a lot of movement to this. Returning to the root means stillness. Stillness means return to fate. Return to fate means eternity. It's like, hopping from one lily pad to the next, yet there's a continuity to it that leads to, when they say eternity, once again, that's like infinite.
So to me, I being again, understanding, traditional Chinese medicine to me is yin and yang. It's a continuation. It goes, day goes into, afternoon, into evening, into early, late night, early morning, day. It's a continuous flow. Yin turns into yang. Once again, go with the flow. It's like, it's going to occur. That's life. That's cycle. That's nature. In my mind, again, we'd say the Tao is the way. It's the path. It's going to occur. And if you think it's not going to, people, it's not. It's like, no, it's the Annie song. I say to my kids when things are tough, I'm not going to sing it and spare you, but, the sun will come out tomorrow. Bet your bottom dollar that tomorrow there'll be sun. And I think that's what this is talking about, is that, yes, the sun will come out tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow will come. We think, oh my God, this is the end of the world. What am I going to do? How am I going to get through this? And this just reminds you, it's the way things will work out. Things do eventually work out for all of us at some point. Sometimes you just can't see it when you're in the immediacy of what's going on. But this passage is beautiful for that, things are going to move. It's going to move, whether you think it or not. And sometimes it's easier to get through something when you know that things are going to move and you're going to get through it.
And the ironic part of that is that the duration and the focus of that, and it's kind of like, how do you stay steadfast with Tao? And it's funny because the answer to that is actually in the process of it. You go with the flow, you stay steadfast with Tao. It's kind of like, oh, okay, you go with the flow, you stay steadfast with Tao. I mean, exactly what you said.
There's a reason it's written here. It's because we need to remember.
Right.
But, there's times in your life and you think, oh, my God, my life's coming to an end. How am I going to get through this? What am I going to do? And you quote, freak out. And, and in this world where there's so much anxiety, you get to a point where if this is going to pass and I'll be okay.
And exactly what you said there is in cognition of eternity means clarity. If one does not recognize the eternal, one falls into confusion.
Right.
And that confusion is the, fixing stuff, the drama.
I don't even go into that. I go into anxiety.
Right.
I go into depression. Yep. I go into that fear that people, when oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to get through this? And that's not minimizing what people go through, because we all have that. Yet, if you can understand, this too will pass. That's just a much nicer way of saying it.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So for the last two, I think the last two kind of sort of go together, 17 and 18. Okay. And it's about the Tao outside and in, but it's layers of it. These are shorter than the other ones that in this section. In 17, I found an irony between, is he describing the Great One as a man of calling, or is it just the Tao that he's talking about? If a holy great one rules. I mean, there's a layer to this. If the Tao is the rule, that's the, being present and being in the flow. And
wouldn't a great one be just someone who's in alignment with the Tao? It doesn't have to be the Tao. It could be both. Well, exactly. Right. Yeah.
Right. Could be both. And I think there's such a beautiful layer to this, and it's a very short one. Mm-hmm. Yet there's a huge amount to it. There's a real depth to it.
Well, basically what it says is if you're one of these people that goes out and tries to make everyone afraid of you, you're the biggest dope of all. The people that go out there and say, I control this, you're going to do this, and I'm this and I'm that, are completely in another world. Their own world. And it's a sick world.
I think it's funny how when he starts out the first part and he talks about lesser men, and sometimes you can read that in two different layers where, that's a kind of a reaction or a judgment that they're loved and praised, or that's a statement of their condition, that they're feared, loved, praised. It's a little bit of a hairy difference.
But the great one, you don't know they exist. The ruler, who's a great ruler, is ruling, and you're not even aware of it. Mm-hmm. The lesser one, one step down from the great one, is loved and praised. They love the ruler because now they're aware of him, and they're loving him and praising him or her. And then the next level.
Well, I can read that differently. I can read it differently as well, because you're actually, when you talk about it, when you put it into words and you're expressing it, I just hear the Tao. The Tao is, it's always there. It's ever present, because you said people hardly know that he exists. I mean, it's a funny kind of way to personalize it. And then after Lao Tzu says these things, or this is transcribed, he says how thoughtful one must be in what one says. And I take that as sincere sarcasm, because it's kind of like a joke to say, think about what I'm saying here. It's almost hypnotic what he does. If you look at it, it's so layered. What occurs, occurs, whether you know it or not. For example, the Earth, we're not rocking back and forth, but it's revolving right now on its axis. The seasons are occurring, but how are we experiencing these? You can study science and you can say, okay, it's occurring because of this, but no matter what, business occurs. It's even like our own bodies. What occurs in our own bodies that we just take for granted. And there's something really interesting to that. We take for granted a lot of stuff that occurs. We don't think when we get up and walk what's occurring in our body for us to walk, and what signals are occurring and what's happening in our autonomic nervous system and everything. Yet it still occurs, and that's just like the Tao.
So then go to 18. And 18, to me, was very frustrating. So
and so I took this as complete irony. It's so the Tao perishes, really? Well, things still go on, don't they? Once again,
well, it can't perish,
right?
I mean, so
exactly.
That's why I'm trying
And so it's inherent in all of us. It's with all of us. It's inherent in all of us. Whatever virtues are going to come out, whatever's going to occur, it's like that saying, life goes on. It's funny because sometimes you say, president's elected, oh my God, the president's going to rule. But there's always like a government, and there's other people doing stuff, and life goes on. It's like your body moving without with you taking for granted certain situations that occur. You might say, how does it work? Well, it's not so important as that it does work.
Right above, he says, be thoughtful in what one says. And then he says this. So there's got to be something to it. Is it all just a joke? I mean, I don't think so. So I understand what you're saying, and I'm not disagreeing, but I think there's another level to it.
Well, I think in 17, it's an expression of, okay, here's the great one that rules. And so he's almost giving a, what if situation and hinting at the Tao. And I don't know him, I'm just suggesting this. Yet then with that sentence, how thoughtful one must be in what one says, it really makes you stop and think, well, what is he saying? And then as it goes into 18, it says, well, okay, now, what if it dies and it's not here? Well, stuff is still going on. So he almost gives the two different extremes of possibility.
When I look at this, I just look at the last part when it says, when states are in confusion, there will be faithful servants. I think all of that, I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying. I think that, when you look at this, like, why would he have a whole separate stanza about if the Tao perishes and talk about it and cleverness in it? It's like when states are in confusion, because all of that's confusion. When I read this, it makes, based on everything we've read, none of that makes sense, right? It's opposite. So when states are in confusion, there will be faithful servants.
If you have to vacuum a room, you take out the vacuum, you vacuum the room, and you clean it, and it's clean. How often do you say, how does this vacuum work? It just does. It works and there's a process to it, but you're not thinking about that when you vacuum the room. And I think in this, when he says, when states are in confusion, there will be faithful servants, it means when doesn't seem any rhyme or reason to what's occurring. I mean, Tao doesn't perish. It's continuous. Yet when states are in confusion, still somebody's running something. Things are occurring, processes are happening, and, I don't know if this stuff is on autopilot or what, yet it's kind of funny. If you ask how it works, it's almost not so as important as it does.
As I see, it's when I'm seeing, all of this craziness, when it's saying, when all these things that actually appear, so over the top, like when people say, I don't know what this world is coming to, and things are crazy out there, and what are people doing, and none of this makes sense. Throughout that, no matter how it appears, there will be faithful servants. When I think of there will be faithful servants, it's certain laws, universal laws will still govern. And I don't mean universal laws by people, I mean by nature. Some of the basic tenuants to being in this life. Because when I read this, I'm like, oh my God, this is like all gone awry. Litany of all these things that make no sense. There will be faithful servants, meaning that when everything appears as though it's all is lost and things are upside down and nothing makes sense, those universal laws that he's talking about through this, and we've read in other books, prevail. What you see and what you think is not going to change what's going to occur with the Tao.
Right.
Things make no sense to me. Well, I have to know that the energy does make sense. And the movement and all of that is consistent. That's the quote, faithful servant, is the energy is consistent. And I don't mean predictable. I mean consistent. Whereas people aren't always consistent. Events occur, things happen, but there's a consistency of the Tao, of the energy.
Okay, so that concludes sections 10 to 18. In our next podcast, we'll be continuing further with 9 more. Thank you for listening to this production from EI Alliance. Check out our Amazon authors pages for books and podcasts. Find New Threads music and their latest album on iTunes, Spotify, and newthreads.us.